Adrian Carter pulled his sleek obsidian-color-old sedan into the cobblestone driveway of his estate on the outskirts of Seattle at exactly 4:47 on a misty Thursday afternoon. This was nearly 2 hours earlier than his usual arrival, a rarity for a man whose life was measured in quarterly earnings and board meetings. He had left the skyscraper downtown without a word to his assistant, loosening his silk tie as he drove across the Evergreen Point floating bridge, his mind a chaotic swarm of unfinished contracts and looming deadlines. His only goal for the day was to sink into the plush leather of his sofa, shut his eyes against the gray Washington sky, and exist in a vacuum of silence until the sun Elena the following morning. The house, a sprawling masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking Lake Washington, usually felt more like a gallery than a home, cold echoes of a life that once was, and filled with a silence that felt heavy enough to drown in. But the moment he pushed open the heavy oak front door, his plan for a silent retreat vanished like smoke in the wind. Music was drifting through the foyer, leaking out from the grand living room. It wasn't the sterile digital sound of a television or a high-end speaker system. It was raw, vibrant, and alive. He heard the steady, earthy thrum of a woman's voice, firm, unhurried, and possessed of a warmth he hadn't encountered in years. Beneath that voice was the unmistakable rhythmic jangle of a small guitar being strummed with deliberate care, and accompanying it was the heartbeat-like pulse of bongo drums. The rhythm was slightly off, a bit hesitant, but it carried a sense of purpose that made the air in the house feel thick with electricity. Nathaniel set his leather briefcase on the marble floor with excruciating care, making no sound, and moved toward the living room with the stealth of a man afraid of shattering a fragile glass sculpture. He stopped at the edge of the doorway. Adrian Carter pulled his sleek obsidian-color-old sedan into the cobblestone driveway of his estate on the outskirts of Seattle at exactly 4:47 on a misty Thursday afternoon. This was nearly 2 hours earlier than his usual arrival, a rarity for a man whose life was measured in quarterly earnings and board meetings. He had left the skyscraper downtown without a word to his assistant, loosening his silk tie as he drove across the Evergreen Point floating bridge, his mind a chaotic swarm of unfinished contracts and looming deadlines. His only goal for the day was to sink into the plush leather of his sofa, shut his eyes against the gray Washington sky, and exist in a vacuum of silence until the sun Elena the following morning. The house, a sprawling masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking Lake Washington, usually felt more like a gallery than a home, cold echoes of a life that once was, and filled with a silence that felt heavy enough to drown in. But the moment he pushed open the heavy oak front door, his plan for a silent retreat vanished like smoke in the wind. Music was drifting through the foyer, leaking out from the grand living room. It wasn't the sterile digital sound of a television or a high-end speaker system. It was raw, vibrant, and alive. He heard the steady, earthy thrum of a woman's voice, firm, unhurried, and possessed of a warmth he hadn't encountered in years. Beneath that voice was the unmistakable rhythmic jangle of a small guitar being strummed with deliberate care, and accompanying it was the heartbeat-like pulse of bongo drums. The rhythm was slightly off, a bit hesitant, but it carried a sense of purpose that made the air in the house feel thick with electricity. Nathaniel set his leather briefcase on the marble floor with excruciating care, making no sound, and moved toward the living room with the stealth of a man afraid of shattering a fragile glass sculpture. He stopped at the edge of the doorway. And yet here was Elena, a woman he had barely spoken to, doing more in 3 months than all the experts had done in 2 years. The sight of Noah's fingers on those strings sent a sharp, pointed ache through Nathaniel's chest. The last time he had seen that particular spark of engagement in his son's eyes was before the world had turned gray. He remembered the warnings from their therapist, Dr. Reynolds, who had sat him down 6 months ago in a room that smelled of lavender and sterile professionalism. The doctor had told him plainly that the boys were showing signs of profound emotional withdrawal, that they weren't just sad, they were becoming disconnected from the world. Foster had emphasized that they needed more than just a schedule. They needed a presence, a soul to anchor them. Nathaniel had promised to be that anchor, and he had meant it with every fiber of his being. But then Monday would come with an investor called, Tuesday with a merger, and Wednesday with a crisis that only his signature could resolve. The 50 or 60-hour work weeks had become a fortress he hid inside, Convinced that if he just built the estate a little higher and the bank account a little larger, he could protect them from the pain. He had convinced himself that providing was the same thing as parenting. But as he watched Elena adjust the microphone, he realized he had been building a monument to his own guilt. While his sons were starving for something money couldn't buy, the meeting he had just come from had lasted 4 hours and had secured a partnership that would expand his firm into 3 new territories. He had walked out of that boardroom feeling like a conqueror, but standing in his hallway, he felt like a pauper. He owed these 2 boys a debt that no spreadsheet could calculate, a debt of time and attention that he had been paying to strangers instead of the people who shared his last name. Elena lowered her voice, slowing the tempo of the song and creating a wide, open space in the melody. It was a deliberate pause, an invitation for the boys to step into the gap. Noah filled the silence with a shaky but resonant chord, and Lucas followed with a sharp, clear strike on the bongos. Elena didn't take back the lead. She wrapped her voice around their sounds, supporting them, letting them be the architects of the moment. Nathaniel's throat tightened as Clear's throat. He recognized the profound grace in her actions. She wasn't performing for them. She was letting them lead, giving them the agency they had lost when their world was turned upside down. She was teaching them that they still had a voice, that they could still create something beautiful even when things felt broken. Close your eyes and just feel it. Elena whispered, her gaze drifting to Lucas. The boy's shoulders were hunched up toward his ears, a physical manifestation of the tension he carried every day. It doesn't have to be perfect, Lucas. It just has to be yours. Do you understand the difference? Nathaniel watched as his son's shoulders slowly dropped. The rhythm of the bongos shifted, becoming lighter, more fluid, and infinitely more confident. It was as if a physical weight had been lifted from the child's spirit. Elena smiled, not a rehearsed professional smile, but a quiet, genuine expression of joy that happens when you witness someone finally find a key to a locked room. In that moment, Nathaniel realized that Elena wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a curator of the souls he had nearly forgotten how to nurture. Addition to the silence that followed the end of the song was not the heavy, oppressive kind Nathaniel was used to. It was a peaceful, satisfied quiet. Noah happened to glance toward the hallway and caught sight of his father standing there in his expensive suit, still holding his coat. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Nathaniel expected the boy to jump up to run to him, or perhaps to look guilty for making noise. But Noah simply offered a small, fleeting smile and turned back to his guitar, his thumb tracing the wood of the fretboard. That lack of urgency hit Nathaniel harder than a scream would have. It was a silent admission that his presence was no longer the sun around Clear's throat, which their world revolved. They had found another source of light, and they were content within it. Lucas didn't notice his father for a long time. He was still lost in the afterglow of the rhythm he had created, his eyes half closed, his small body swaying slightly. There was a newfound confidence in his posture, a sturdiness that hadn't been there when Nathaniel left for work that morning at 7 o'clock. Nathaniel watched his son with a mixture of immense pride and a very specific sharp-edged pain. The kind of grief that comes when you realize you've missed a milestone you can never get back. His children were growing, evolving, and healing in ways he hadn't been there to witness. He leaned his briefcase against the wall, realizing that entering the room right now would be an intrusion. He was a stranger to this beautiful, fragile ecosystem they had built in his absence. Elena made a small adjustment to the music stand and looked at Noah. "You missed the chord on the 4th beat, honey," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Noah knit his brow, his small face scrunched in thought. "I thought I got it right," he murmured. "Close," Elena replied. "But close isn't the same as hitting it. Do you want to try again, or should we move on?" Noah didn't hesitate. He repositioned his fingers with a fierce determination that Nathaniel recognized instantly. It was the same stubborn streak Nathaniel used to close deals, the refusal to accept anything less than the best. Seeing that trait mirrored in his son, harnessed for something as pure as music, brought a genuine smile to Nathaniel's face for the first time in weeks. Noah played the segment again, and this time the chord rang out true and clear. Lucas gave a sharp tap on the bongo in approval, and Elena nodded. "That's your chord, Noah. You own it now." The boy let out a quick, muffled laugh, trying to play it cool, but failing to hide the sparkle of triumph in his eyes. They continued playing for another 15 minutes, and Nathaniel stayed exactly where he was hidden in the shadows of the hallway. He watched as Elena managed the energy of the room with an effortless grace, never pushing too hard, never letting them give up. She was building their resilience brick by brick through the medium of melody and rhythm. When the session finally wound down, the music fading into the sounds of the Seattle evening, the distant hum of traffic, and the soft patter of rain against the glass, Elena sat back and looked at the twins. "You two were incredible today," she said. "Truly incredible." Lucas threw his arms into the air and let out a triumphant shout that echoed through the high ceilings of the house. Noah remained quiet, but the way he held his guitar told Nathaniel everything he needed to know. The instrument wasn't just a toy, it was a shield. Elena laughed, then a real, unburdened sound that seemed to fill the cracks in the house. It was that laugh that gave Nathaniel the courage to finally step into the light of the living room. As his leather shoes clicked against the hardwood floor, Elena looked up, her expression shifting instantly from joy to a professional guarded mask. She stood up quickly, smoothing her apron. "Good afternoon, Mr. Owens. I didn't realize you would be home so early. I hope the noise wasn't a disturbance." Nathaniel raised his hand, his gesture soft and placating. "Not at all, Elena. I've been standing in the hall for quite some time. I heard everything." Before she could respond, Noah was on his feet, holding his guitar up like a trophy. "Dad, did you see? Did you hear me play?" Nathaniel knelt down so he was at his son's eye level, looking into a face that finally looked like a child's again. "I did, Noah. It was beautiful. Where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Noah pointed a small finger at Elena without a second of hesitation. "Elena teaches us every day when you aren't here," he said with the brutal, unvarnished honesty of a 6-year-old. Those words, "when you aren't here," struck Nathaniel with the force of a physical blow. There was no malice in the boy's voice, just a simple statement of fact, which made it all the more devastating. Nathaniel stood up and walked over to Lucas, who was watching him with a more cautious expression. Lucas was the observer, the one who measured the air before he chose to breathe it. Nathaniel knelt beside the bongos and ran his hand over the taut skin of the drum. "Teach me how you do that, Lucas," he said softly. Lucas looked at his father for a long moment, his eyes searching Nathaniel's face for something specific. "You never wanted to learn before," the boy said quietly. Nathaniel didn't flinch, didn't offer a hollow excuse about being busy or tired. He simply stayed exactly where he was, grounded and present. "I know I didn't," Nathaniel admitted, "but I want to learn now if you're willing to show me." Lucas studied him for a few more heartbeats, the silence stretching between them like a bridge under construction. Finally, the boy took Nathaniel's hand, placed it flat on the center of the drum, and said, "Open palm, Dad. If you close your fingers, the sound gets choked. You have to let it breathe." Nathaniel followed the instruction, striking the drum. The sound was dull and flat. Lucas wrinkled his nose. "Not like that. Watch Blooded Steeds." For the next hour, the billionaire CEO of one of the most successful investment firms in the country sat on the floor of his living room being schooled by a 6-year-old. Elena remained on the other side of the room, her hands folded over her apron, watching the scene with a quiet, observant intensity. Nathaniel could feel her eyes on him, but he didn't look up. He was focused entirely on his son's small hands and the lessons in rhythm. He realized that this was the most productive hour he had spent in years. There were no stakes here other than the connection between a father and his sons. Yet, it felt more important than any multi-million-dollar merger he had ever overseen. He was learning how to listen again, not for information, but for emotion. Noah eventually joined in strumming a simple progression that Elena had taught him, while Lucas and Nathaniel tried to keep the beat. The room was filled with a chaotic, beautiful noise that would have been unthinkable just a few months prior. Elena stepped in occasionally to correct a posture or a rhythm, her voice always maintaining that same calm, steady tone. She had a way of providing space for them to fail without making them feel like failures. Nathaniel watched her closely, realizing that she possessed a type of emotional intelligence that he had never bothered to cultivate. She saw the boys not as problems to be solved, but as people to be known. It was a distinction that changed everything. As the evening deepened and the shadows grew long across the floorboards, the boys finally began to tire. Lucas eventually leaned his head against Elena's shoulder, his eyes fluttering shut, while Noah curled up on the other side of her, his guitar still clutched in his arms. The instruments lay scattered on the rug like discarded toys, but they felt more like sacred objects to Nathaniel now. He stood by the window, looking out at the dark waters of the lake, trying to process the sheer scale of what he had witnessed. He turned to see Elena sitting on the floor with his sons draped over her, an image of peace and maternal comfort that he had thought was gone from this house forever. "Let me take them," Nathaniel whispered, stepping forward. "You should go rest." Elena managed to stand up without waking either of the boys, her movements fluid and practiced. She straightened her apron and began to gather her things. Nathaniel stopped her before she reached the door. "Elena," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. She paused and turned back to him. "How long has this been going on? How long have they been like this?" Elena took a breath, choosing her words with the same care she used when teaching a melody. "Since the second month," she replied. "I noticed Noah standing by the kitchen speakers every time I put on music while I was cleaning. He looked so hungry for it." She continued, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "I went into the storage closet under the stairs and found that little red guitar buried under a pile of old blankets and dust. I asked him if he wanted to try, and he didn't let go of it for 2 hours. His fingers were red from the strings, but he didn't complain once. He just wanted to hear the sound." Nathaniel felt a lump form in his throat. He had forgotten that guitar even existed. It had been a gift from Sophia's sister years ago, something they had tucked away and forgotten in the chaos of their grief. "And Lucas?" Nathaniel asked. "Lucas took longer," Elena said. "He watched from the doorway for weeks. He'd come in for a minute, then run away. But one afternoon, he just sat down and started tapping the rhythm on his knees. I went out and bought those bongos with my own money that weekend because I knew he needed something to hit. He needed to let the energy out." The realization that his housekeeper had spent her own modest wages to provide his children with the tools for their healing hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. "I will reimburse you," he said quickly, "and I'll pay you double your current rate starting immediately." Elena shook her head gently. "I didn't do it for the money, Mr. Owens. I did it because they were drowning in silence, and I knew how to swim." Nathaniel looked at her, truly looking at her for the first time. "I know you didn't do it for the money," he said, his voice steady. "That's exactly why I'm going to pay you, but I have to know, why did you get involved? You could have just done your job and gone home. Most people would have." Elena looked him in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "Because I had a nephew, Noah, who went through something similar after my sister passed away. He didn't speak for a year. He just faded away until he was almost gone. The only thing that brought him back was an old harmonica my grandfather gave him. It wasn't the doctors or the therapy that saved him. It was the music. It was the ability to express the things that were too big for words. When I saw Noah and Lucas, I saw Noah. I couldn't just stand there and watch them disappear when I knew there was a way to reach them." She paused, her expression softening. "They were well-fed, Mr. Owens. They had a beautiful roof over their heads, but they were starving for someone to just be there without a phone in their hand or a clock to watch." Suddenly Nathaniel spent a long time staring at his sleeping sons after Elena left that evening. Her words echoed in his mind, stripping away the justifications he had built around his lifestyle. He realized that for 2 years he had been a ghost haunting his own home, providing the physical necessities of life while neglecting the spiritual ones. He had treated his sons like a project to be managed rather than a relationship to be cherished. He walked over to the window and watched the rain streak down the glass, reflecting on the dozens of experts he had hired. They had all been looking for a clinical solution, a diagnosis, a protocol. None of them had simply picked up a guitar and sat on the floor. None of them had noticed the boys were tapping out rhythms on their knees. The next morning, Nathaniel did something he hadn't done in years. He stayed for breakfast. Usually, he was out the door by 6:30, leaving the boys in the care of whatever nanny or housekeeper was on shift. But today he sat at the kitchen island drinking coffee and waiting for them to wake up. When Noah and Lucas stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from their eyes, they stopped dead in their tracks at the sight of him. "You're still here?" Lucas asked, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and hope. "I'm still here," Nathaniel said, pulling out the chairs for them. "And I'm not leaving until after I drop you off at school." The boys looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them that Nathaniel couldn't quite decipher. But the atmosphere in the kitchen felt different, lighter. As they ate their cereal, Nathaniel asked them about their music. He learned that Noah liked the way the guitar made his chest vibrate, and Lucas liked the thump of the bongos because it felt like a heartbeat. He listened to them talk for 40 minutes, never once checking his watch or glancing at his phone. He realized that in those 40 minutes, he had learned more about his sons than he had in the previous 2 years combined. He saw their humor, their anxieties, and their incredible resilience. When Elena arrived at 8 o'clock, she found Nathaniel clearing the table while the boys ran to get their backpacks. She looked surprised, but she didn't say a word. She simply went to the sink and began her morning routine. Nathaniel walked over to her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said last night about the contract," he told her. "I want to officially change your role. You'll still help with the house, of course, but I want your primary focus to be the boys, the music, the lessons, the time. I'll make sure the compensation reflects the importance of that work." Elena looked at him, her eyes searching his. "I accept," she said simply. "But on one condition, Mr. Owens." Nathaniel nodded, curious. "What's the condition?" Elena dried her hands on a towel and looked toward the living room. "You have to be part of it. The music only goes so far if the person they want to hear it most isn't listening. They love the guitar and the drums, but they love you more. Don't let the music become another thing they do while you aren't here." Nathaniel felt the weight of her words, the truth of them settling into his bones. "I understand," he said. "I'll be here. I promise." He left for work that day, feeling a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins. He had a new goal to be a man worthy of the music his sons were making. The following weeks were a period of intense transformation within the Owens household. Nathaniel began a strict policy of leaving the office by 5 o'clock every day. At first, his colleagues were baffled. There were rumors of a health crisis or a secret project, but Nathaniel ignored the gossip. He spent his evenings on the floor of the living room, learning the bongos alongside Lucas and watching Noah master new chords. The house began to fill with the sounds of laughter and the occasional discord of a missed note, but even the mistakes felt like progress. They were no longer a collection of individuals living under the same roof. They were becoming a family again. One evening, after a particularly successful jam session, Nathaniel found himself looking at the grand piano in the corner of the room. It had belonged to Sophia. She hadn't been a professional, but she had played every single day her music, the backdrop of their early years together. Since the accident, Nathaniel had kept the lid closed, unable to bear the sight of the keys she would never touch again. It had become a silent tombstone in the middle of their home. But as he watched his sons laughing with Elena, he realized that by closing the piano, he had been trying to lock away the memory of Sophia's joy along with his own pain. He had been teaching his sons that when something breaks, you hide it away forever. "Hunan, my wife used to play that," Nathaniel said softly, gesturing toward the piano. Elena and the boys went quiet. Noah walked over to the instrument and ran a small hand along the polished wood. "I remember," the boy whispered. "She used to play the song about the moon." Nathaniel felt a tear prick at the corner of his eye. He hadn't realized Noah remembered so clearly. "She did," Nathaniel said. "She played it every night before you went to bed." He walked over to the piano, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the lid. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of 2 years of suppressed grief pressing down on him. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted the cover. The keys were dusty, but they shone in the lamplight. Nathaniel sat down on the bench, the leather cool beneath him. He hadn't played in years, but as he placed his fingers on the keys, the muscle memory began to return. He played a few tentative notes, the sound echoing through the room with a haunting clarity. Lucas and Noah moved closer, their faces filled with wonder. Elena stood back, a soft smile on her face. Nathaniel began to play the song Noah had mentioned, a simple lilting melody that Sophia had loved. He played it slowly, letting the notes linger in the air, a tribute to the woman who was no longer there, but whose spirit was finally being invited back into the house. When he finished, the room was silent for a long time. Then Noah climbed onto the bench beside him. "Can you teach me that one, Dad?" he asked. Nathaniel put his arm around his son and pulled him close. "I'd love to, Noah. We'll learn it together." In that moment, the last of the ice that had encased Nathaniel's heart finally melted away. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or fixing what was broken. It was about finding a way to integrate the loss into a new, more complex melody. It was about opening the lids we close out of fear and letting the music back in, even if it sounded different than it did before. The next afternoon, Nathaniel arrived home to find a small, colorful note taped to the stainless steel refrigerator. It was written in the shaky, earnest print of a 6-year-old. "Dad, today is the day we play the new song. Don't forget." Nathaniel took the note down his thumb, tracing the uneven letters. He folded it carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of his blazer right over his heart. He spent the rest of the afternoon in his home office, but his mind wasn't on the emails piling up in his inbox. He was thinking about the new song. He was thinking about how a woman who was hired to mop floors had ended up sweeping away the cobwebs of a grieving family's soul. At exactly 5 o'clock, Nathaniel closed his laptop and headed downstairs. He found the trio in their usual spot. Noah was tuning his guitar with a newfound seriousness, while Lucas was testing the tension on his bongos. Elena was standing by the window, humming a tune that seemed to catch the golden light of the setting sun. When they saw Nathaniel, the boys cheered. "You made it!" Lucas shouted. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Nathaniel replied, taking his seat on the floor. Elena handed him a pair of drumsticks she had picked up for him, a silent acknowledgement that he was now a permanent member of the ensemble. The new song was a collaboration. The boys had come up with the lyrics, which were simple and profound, as only children's words can be. They sang about a house that was too big and a silence that was too loud. And then they sang about the music that had brought the light back. Elena provided the melody, her voice soaring over the rhythmic tapping of the drums and the steady strumming of the guitar. Nathaniel joined in on the percussion, his eyes locked on his sons. He saw the way they leaned into each other, the way they looked to Elena for guidance and to him for approval. He realized that this was the most valuable thing he owned. Not the house, not the firm, but this messy, imperfect, beautiful moment. As they finished the song, the boys collapsed into a heap of giggles on the rug. Elena began to gather the instruments, but Nathaniel stopped her. "Stay for dinner, Elena," he said. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. Elena looked at the boys, then back at Nathaniel. "I'd like that," she said softly. That dinner was the loudest and most chaotic the house had seen in years. There was no talk of business or school grades. They talked about music, about the mistake lesson Elena had taught them, and about what they wanted to learn next. Nathaniel felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt since Sophia was alive. He realized that he had been trying to find happiness in achievements when it had been waiting for him in the simple act of sharing a meal with the people he loved. The transformation of the Owens household did not go unnoticed. A few weeks later, Nathaniel's sister-in-law, Victoria, dropped by unexpectedly. She had been Sophia's younger sister and had been a constant, if somewhat overbearing, presence in the boys' lives since the accident. She was a woman who believed in structure therapy and the proper way of doing things. When she walked into the living room and saw the musical instruments, the open piano, and Elena sitting on the floor with the boys, her jaw nearly dropped. She pulled Nathaniel aside into the kitchen, her expression one of deep concern. "Nathaniel, what on earth is going on here?" she whispered, gesturing toward the living room. "Since when do we have a drum circle in the middle of the house? And why is the housekeeper teaching the boys music? Shouldn't they be with a licensed therapist or a proper tutor?" Nathaniel looked at Victoria, seeing in her the same rigid fear he had carried for 2 years. She was trying to protect the boys by keeping them within the boundaries of what she considered normal. He poured her a cup of tea and leaned against the counter. "The therapist didn't work, Victoria. You know that as well as I do. We spent 2 years following the rules, and the boys were miserable." He took a sip of his tea, his gaze drifting to the doorway, where he could hear the faint sound of Noah practicing a scale. Elena didn't follow a manual. She just noticed them. She saw that they were drowning, and she gave them something to hold on to. She gave them a voice when they didn't have the words. Victoria shook her head, her skepticism still evident. "But she's the help, Nathaniel. It's unconventional. People will talk." Nathaniel laughed a short, sharp sound. "Let them talk. For the first time in 2 years, my sons are laughing. They're sleeping through the night. They're excited about the future. If that's unconventional, then I want nothing to do with tradition." Victoria was silent for a long moment, watching the scene in the living room. She saw Lucas show Elena a new rhythm, and she saw the way Elena listened, truly listened, with her whole being. She saw the light in the boy's eyes that had been missing for so long. Slowly, the tension in Victoria's shoulders began to dissipate. She turned back to Nathaniel, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I haven't seen them look like that since Sophia. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I know, Nathaniel said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Neither have I. Come and sit with us. We're working on a new song. That evening, Victoria joined the circle. She didn't play an instrument, but she clapped along and sang when she knew the words. It was a small step, but it was a significant one. The circle of healing was expanding, drawing in the people who had been sidelined by grief. Nathaniel realized that by allowing Elena to change his home, he had created a space where everyone felt safe enough to be vulnerable. The music wasn't just for the boys. It was for all of them. It was a bridge over the chasm of their shared loss, a way to reach each other across the silence. As the weeks turned into months, the Elena effect, as Nathaniel privately called it, continued to ripple through their lives. The boys were more engaged at school, their teachers reporting a marked improvement in their social interactions and academic performance. Nathaniel himself found that his newfound balance at home actually made him more effective at work. He was no longer reacting to crises with a clouded, exhausted mind. He was more focused, more decisive, and infinitely more empathetic. He began to implement changes at his firm, encouraging his employees to prioritize their families and offering more flexible schedules. He realized that a successful life wasn't just about the peak of the mountain. It was about the quality of the climb. The school year was drawing to a close, and the Boys Academy announced its annual talent showcase. It was a grand affair held in a local theater in downtown Seattle where students were encouraged to share a skill or passion they had developed. When the flyer came home in Noah's backpack, the boys were ecstatic. "We have to do the song, Dad," Lucas exclaimed. "The one we wrote with Elena." Nathaniel looked at Elena, who was helping Noah with a particularly tricky chord. "What do you think, Elena? Are they ready?" Elena looked at the boys, her eyes filled with pride. "They've been ready for a long time," she said. "But they want you to be part of it, Nathaniel." The idea of performing on a stage in front of hundreds of people, including his business peers and social acquaintances, sent a shiver of anxiety through Nathaniel. He was a man who gave keynote speeches and led board meetings. But playing the bongos in a school talent show was a different kind of exposure. It was a vulnerability he wasn't sure he was ready for. But then he looked at his sons, their faces shining with anticipation, and he knew he couldn't say no. "All right," he said, his voice steadying. "We'll do it, but we need a lot of practice." The next month was a whirlwind of rehearsals. They practiced every evening, refining the lyrics and tightening the rhythm. Elena acted as their director, her keen ear catching every missed beat and flat note. She pushed them just enough to make them strive for excellence, but never so much that the joy was lost. Nathaniel found himself practicing his rhythms in his car on the way to work, his fingers tapping on the steering wheel. He was more nervous about this 3-minute performance than he had ever been about a multi-million-dollar closing. He realized it was because this mattered more. This was a testament to their survival. On the night of the showcase, the theater was packed. Nathaniel sat backstage with the boys and Elena, his heart hammering against his ribs. Noah was pacing his small guitar strapped to his back, while Lucas was drummed a nervous rhythm on his thighs. Elena sat calmly in a chair, her presence a steadying force in the midst of the backstage chaos. "Remember," she whispered to the boys, "it's not about being perfect. It's about the feeling. Just look at each other and play for us. The audience is just extra." Nathaniel took a deep breath, realizing her advice was for him as much as for the children. When their name was called, they walked out onto the stage. The bright lights were blinding, and the sea of faces in the audience was a blur. Nathaniel took his seat behind the bongos. Noah and Lucas stood at their microphones, and Elena stood slightly to the side with her guitar. The room went silent. Noah started the song, his guitar ringing out through the theater with a surprising strength. Then Lucas joined in, and finally, Nathaniel. Their voices blended together in the song they had written. A song about loss, about finding each other, and about the music that had saved them. As they played, the anxiety Nathaniel had felt vanished. He wasn't a CEO, and he wasn't a widower. He was a father, and he was part of something beautiful. He looked at Noah, who was singing with his eyes closed, his face radiant. He looked at Lucas, who was hitting the bongos with a fierce, joyful intensity. And he looked at Elena, whose voice was the anchor that held them all together. In that moment, Nathaniel understood that this was the pinnacle of his success. Not the skyscrapers or the bank accounts, but this moment of pure, unadulterated connection. When they finished, the silence in the theater lasted for a heartbeat before erupting into a deafening roar of applause. The drive home from the theater was filled with the boys' excited chatter. They were reliving every second of the performance, their voices overlapping in a chaotic, happy jumble. Elena sat in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, a look of deep satisfaction on her face. Nathaniel drove in silence, his mind reflecting on the journey they had taken. He remembered the cold, silent house he had walked into months ago, and he looked at the vibrant, noisy life that now filled his car. He realized that the greatest investment he had ever made wasn't in a stock or a company. It was in a woman named Elena and a red guitar. When they arrived at the estate, the boys were still buzzing with energy. They ran into the house, their laughter echoing through the foyer. Elena began to gather her things to head home, but Nathaniel stopped her one last time. "Elena, I don't think I can ever thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just teach them music. You brought them back to me. You brought me back." Elena smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the porch light. "I didn't do it alone, Nathaniel. You had to be willing to listen. You had to be willing to open the door." As Elena walked to her car, Nathaniel stood on the porch and watched her leave. He looked up at the Seattle sky, the stars peeking through the clouds. He realized that the lessons he had learned over the past few months were far more valuable than anything he had learned in business school. He had learned that time is the only currency that truly matters, and once it's spent, it's gone forever. He had learned that the most profound changes often come from the most unexpected people, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is get down on the floor and learn to play the drums. He walked back into the house, the sound of his son's laughter drawing him toward the living room. He saw them sitting on the rug, already planning their next concert. He sat down beside them, the red guitar and the bongos within reach. He realized that the music would never truly end as long as they were willing to keep playing together. The house was no longer a museum of grief. It was a workshop of hope. And as Nathaniel picked up the bongos, he knew that they were finally truly home. "Chan, watching the world through the lens of 70 years, I've come to realize that we often spend the best part of our lives building walls we call security and success. We toil away in high-rise offices, convincing ourselves that every late hour and every missed dinner is a brick in the foundation of our children's happiness. But the truth, the quiet, undeniable truth that only reveals itself when the hair turns gray and the pace of life slows, is that children don't want the bricks. They want the builder. They don't want the estate. They want the person who lives inside it." Nathaniel's story is the story of every one of us who has ever confused providing with being present. We buy the best toys, the best schools, and the best therapists, forgetting that the most powerful healing force on this earth is simply a person who is willing to sit on the floor and stay there until the silence doesn't hurt anymore. In the autumn of our lives, we don't look back and wish we had closed one more deal or spent 10 more hours in a boardroom. We look back at the quiet afternoons, the shared songs, and the moments when we were brave enough to be vulnerable. We remember the people like Elena, those quiet souls who enter our lives without fanfare, and notice the things we were too busy to see. They are the ones who remind us that life isn't a problem to be solved with money or logic, but a melody to be felt. They teach us that the most profound wisdom doesn't come from a textbook or an expert, but from the simple, honest act of paying attention to the heartbeats of those around us. There is a specific kind of regret that haunts the elderly, the regret of the almost. I almost stayed for breakfast. I almost played that song. I almost listened. But Nathaniel was given a rare gift, the chance to turn an almost into an always. He learned that the piano lid should never stay closed just because the person who used to play it is gone. Instead, we should open it wider, inviting new hands to touch the keys and new voices to join the chorus. We honor those we've lost not by preserving our grief in a sterile vacuum, but by allowing their love to evolve into something new and vibrant. Music, like life, requires both the high notes and the low, the harmony and the dissonance. It's the willingness to play through the mistakes that makes the final symphony beautiful. So, if you find yourself today in a house that feels too quiet, or if you've been building your own walls of success at the expense of your soul, I hope you remember those 6-year-old boys and their red guitar. I hope you realize that it's never too late to get down on the floor. Whether you're 30 or 80, the most important work you will ever do is the work of connection. Listen for the rhythms in the people you love. Notice when they're tapping their knees in silence, waiting for someone to notice they have a song inside them. And most importantly, when you have the choice between a spreadsheet and a song, always choose the song. For in the end, when the lights dim and the final curtain begins to close, it won't be the wealth that stays with you. It will be the echo of the music you made together. What is your opinion about this story? Please write comment. Good night. Have a sweet dreams.